You know that feeling? The one where the air gets thick? Like you could reach out and touch the tension? That's what group therapy felt like most days. A room full of strangers, bound together by hurts we didn't quite know how to talk about. I was there too, holding my own secrets close, trying to find a way to breathe again. We sat in that circle of worn-out chairs every Tuesday. There was Sarah, who jumped at loud noises. There was David, whose smile never quite reached his eyes. And then there was Mark. Mark was quiet. He wasn't like some of the others who filled the silence easily, maybe too easily. He mostly listened. His shoulders seemed permanently slumped, like he was carrying something incredibly heavy. You could see the exhaustion etched around his eyes, even though he looked young, maybe late 20s. He rarely made eye contact. When he did, his gaze was distant, like he was seeing something else entirely, something far away and unpleasant. Our therapist, Dr. Evans, tried gently to draw him out each week. "Mark, anything you'd like to share today?" she'd ask, her voice soft. Usually he'd just shake his head, a barely perceptible movement. Sometimes he'd murmur, "Not today." We respected that, mostly. We all had our walls, we all knew how fragile things felt. Pushing too hard could make everything shatter. Or so I thought. But there was this one guy, Gary. Gary had a cynical edge. He'd been coming longer than most of us. Sometimes he seemed to think he'd heard it all, seen it all. He'd roll his eyes sometimes, or let out this little scoffing sound when someone shared something he found, well, unbelievable, I guess. Dr. Evans often had to gently remind him about empathy. This particular Tuesday felt different. Maybe it was the rain drumming against the window panes, making the room feel even smaller, more intense. Maybe it was something in the air. Mark seemed even more withdrawn than usual. His knuckles were white where he gripped the arms of his chair. Dr. Evans did her usual round. Sarah talked about a panic attack she'd had at the grocery store. David spoke about a difficult phone call with his estranged son. Then it was Mark's turn. "Mark," Dr. Evans prompted softly. We all waited. Usually this was where he'd shake his head. But today he took a breath. A deep, shaky breath that seemed to pull the air right out of the room. He didn't look up. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Rough, like sandpaper. I have trouble," he started, then stopped. Took another breath. With loud noises. Sudden ones. Okay, that wasn't exactly news in this room. Many of us did. Sarah nodded slightly in understanding. Mark continued, his gaze fixed on the worn carpet, specifically, the sound. The sound of things falling, like a tray, being dropped in a cafeteria. Or a stack of books. He swallowed hard. "It sends me right back. I can't breathe. I freeze up." He paused. The room was quiet, except for the rain. We were waiting for more. Waiting for the story behind the trigger. That's how it worked here. You shared the symptom then, if you could, you shared the source. But before Mark could say another word, it happened. A chuckle. It started low, almost a snort. It came from Gary. My head snapped towards him. Gary had a smirk on his face. He was looking at Mark like he was something amusing, something pathetic. "Seriously," Gary said, the smirk widening. "Dropped trays. Books, that's what sets you off, man. Sounds like you need to lighten up, not hide in here." Then someone else tittered nervously. A woman near Gary, maybe trying to diffuse the tension, or maybe just caught up in his callousness. Another nervous giggle followed. It wasn't loud, roaring laughter. It was worse. It was dismissive, belittling. It was like a physical blow in that quiet, vulnerable space. I saw Mark flinch. His head dipped lower, his shoulders hunched even further, as if trying to disappear into himself. The faint bit of color that had been in his face drained away, leaving him looking pale and fragile. He literally seemed to shrink in his chair. My own blood ran cold, my stomach clenched. How could they? Here, in this room, of all places. This was supposed to be the safe place. The one place judgment wasn't allowed. Dr. Evans immediately tried to step in. "Gary," she said, her voice firm but calm. "That is not appropriate. We need to respect everyone's experience here." Gary just shrugged, still smirking. "Just saying. Sounds a bit dramatic." The nervous giggles stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable thick silence. The kind that presses down on you. Shame hung heavy in the air. Shame for Gary's cruelty. Shame for the nervous laughter that had joined in. Shame, maybe, for just sitting there and letting it happen. I felt a surge of anger towards Gary, towards the others who laughed. But beneath it I felt a wave of empathy so strong for Mark it almost choked me. I knew that feeling. The feeling of being exposed, vulnerable, and then having someone stomp on that vulnerability. Mark remained silent, head bowed. I thought he would shut down completely. I thought he might even get up and walk out. I wouldn't have blamed him. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave, that he didn't need this. But then, something shifted. Slowly, incredibly slowly, Mark lifted his head. He didn't look angry. He didn't look tearful. He just looked empty, hollowed out. But his eyes weren't distant anymore. They were sharp, focused, and they swept across the room, meeting the eyes of those who had chuckled, meeting Gary's smirk. Then they landed on mine for a brief second, and I saw a flicker of something raw, something devastating. His voice, when he spoke again, was different. It wasn't the shaky whisper from before. It was low, level, devoid of inflection, but heavy, so incredibly heavy. Each word seemed to cost him something immense. You think, he started, his gaze settling back on Gary. You think a dropped tray is funny. Gary's smirk faltered slightly under the weight of Mark's stare. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, man. Mark cut him off, his voice still chillingly level. Let me tell you about the sound of things falling. The room was absolutely silent now. Even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. I was a firefighter, Mark said, his eyes locked on Gary. Fairly new, eager, maybe a bit naive. My own breath caught in my throat. A firefighter. There was a fire, he continued, his voice flat, reciting facts more than telling a story. An old apartment building. Went up fast, real fast. We were doing search and rescue. 3rd floor. He paused, taking a slow, deliberate breath. The floor above us was unstable. We knew it. Command kept yelling updates over the radio. Risk versus reward. Standard stuff. His eyes flickered around the room again, briefly. Seeing us. Really seeing us. We found someone. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, hiding in a closet, scared, but alive. My partner, older guy, name was Dave. Dave grabbed her, started heading out. I was covering them, trying to see through the smoke, trying to hear over the roar of the fire, and the creaking. He trailed off for a second, swallowing hard. Then came the noise, he said, his voice dropping even lower. Not one big crash. Not like in the movies. It started, small, cracking sounds, pops, then a ripping noise, like giant cardboard tearing. His eyes glazed over slightly, seeing it again. And then things started falling. Not books, not cafeteria trays. His voice thickened. Chunks of ceiling, plaster, burning wood. Then a whole section of the floor above us gave way. He looked directly at Gary again. The emptiness in his eyes was now filled with a horrifying clarity. It sounded like 1,000 things falling at once. Heavy things. Things that crush. Dave shoved the girl towards me. Yelled go. He tried to shield her, I think. Or maybe he just slipped. It happened so fast. Mark's hands were shaking now, but his voice remained eerily steady. The debris came down, right where Dave was standing, right between me and the exit. I had the girl. I couldn't go back for him. The rest of the ceiling was coming down. I just ran, dragged her out into the hallway, passed her off to another crew. He stopped talking. The silence that followed wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was suffocating, thick with horror, with understanding, with crushing, unbearable shame. No one moved. No one breathed. Gary's face was white. The smirk was long gone, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, maybe even horror. The women who had giggled looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. They stared at their laps, faces flushed crimson. Mark took another deep, shuddering breath. The steady control was starting to crack. So yeah, he whispered, the whisper back, but raw now, torn. The sound of things falling, a dropped tray, a stack of books. It doesn't sound like books, to me. It sounds like, he choked on the words. Like Dave. It sounds like failing. It sounds like burning. He finally broke eye contact, looking down at his trembling hands. The weight he carried was suddenly visible to all of us. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was the crushing weight of memory, of trauma, of loss. The weight of being the one who walked out. Dr. Evans sat frozen for a moment, clearly as shocked as the rest of us. Then she seemed to gather herself, her expression filled with deep compassion. But she didn't speak immediately. She let the silence hang there, letting the full impact of Mark's words sink in, letting the shame do its work. I looked around the circle. Every face reflected a mixture of shock and deep regret. The easy judgment, the casual cruelty, it had shattered against the hard reality of Mark's pain. A pain none of us could have imagined just moments before. My own eyes stung with tears. Tears for Mark. Tears for his lost partner, Dave. Tears for the little girl. Tears for the invisible wounds we all carried, and how easily they could be dismissed by those who didn't understand. How quickly we could judge the surface without knowing the crushing depths beneath. Gary opened his mouth, then closed it again. His face crumpled slightly. Mark, he finally managed, his voice barely audible. Man, I am so sorry, I had no idea. That's, God, I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry. Mark didn't look up. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't offer forgiveness. He didn't offer anger. He just was. Broken, but present. He had shared the unbearable, and now he seemed drained, utterly spent. The rest of the session passed in a blur of strained quiet and mumbled apologies directed at Mark. No one else shared anything significant. How could we? Everything felt trivial compared to what Mark had laid bare. The dynamic of the room had completely changed. The easy familiarity was gone, replaced by a heavy awareness, a somber respect. When the session ended, we filed out silently. Usually there was some quiet chatter in the hallway. Not today. Today there was only the sound of footsteps on the carpet and the receding drumming of the rain. Mark left quickly, alone, head down. Gary lingered, looking lost and ashamed. I walked out into the damp air, pulling my jacket tighter. The rain had eased to a drizzle. I thought about Mark's quiet strength in revealing his deepest wound, even after being mocked. I thought about the casual cruelty born from ignorance. It reminded me why I was in therapy myself. Not for PTSD like Mark's, but for the aftermath of judgments and betrayals that had left scars just as deep, even if they weren't as dramatically visible. It reminded me that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Everyone carries unseen weights. Mark didn't come back the following week, or the week after. Dr. Evans told us he was taking some time, which we all understood. Gary was quieter, more thoughtful. The nervous gigglers seemed genuinely contrite. The whole group felt different, humbled, more cautious. Maybe, hopefully, more kind. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest pain. And sometimes the simplest words spoken from the depths of that pain have the power to silence a room, to shatter assumptions, and maybe, just maybe, to make us all a little more human. We never saw Mark in group again, but I never forgot his story. It stays with me. A quiet reminder. Be kind. You never know what someone else is carrying. I hope this story resonated with you. We all have our own struggles, and empathy costs nothing. If you felt moved by this story, please give it a like, comment below with your thoughts, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening.